Hello, everyone. This is Derek Kwan, Executive Director at Your Lead Center of Kansas, and I am really so excited today to be welcoming really my primary professional mentor over the last 20 plus years. And this gentleman has such a storied history, both in the arts and culture in general. I first encountered him at Jazz at Lincoln Center in 2000, and he had just been recruited by Wynton Marsalis to join Jazz at Lincoln Center from his position as the vice president of the Lincoln Foundation in Louisville, Kentucky. So from 2000 to 2006, my guest, André Kimo Stone Guess, was a leader, vice president and producer of programming and concert operations for Jazz at Lincoln Center. And he moved on after that to run his own management company, managing some of the greatest jazz artists in the world, and also during that time served as president and CEO of the August Wilson Center for African American Culture in Pittsburgh. Now, if that wasn't enough, André is an extremely accomplished and published author and writer. You'll see him on the Undefeated, writing on all different kinds of topics, ranging from social justice to mental illness to sports, to jazz. I mean, so, man, I can't honestly thank André enough for being an incredible mentor to me for the last 20 plus years. So welcome to André Kimo Stone Guess. I hope that was a worthy enough introduction for you, sir.
Well, you made me sound good in the way that you made me look good back in the day when we were working together, right? So
no, man.
I was able to stay employed because Derek did all the work.
no, man, that's not true, man. Oh, man. But hey, man, I just want to thank you for taking the time, because it's always really great to reconnect with you, no matter what the circumstances are. So you're one of my most favorite persons in the world, Derek. I remember you. Oh, likewise,
you broke my heart when you broke my heart when you left, but I knew you when you went to grad school. But look at you now. You've done great things, and to know that I had just the smallest part to do with your professional development, brings me great joy.
No, man, I learned so much from you, and I still cite some of those learnings today. And, but man, these last few months, tell me a little bit how you and your family have been staying sane and staying creative and staying busy through these really unique times.
Well, what's interesting is that for my wife Cheryl and myself, the new normal has kind of been somewhat normal for us because we work out of our home. I travel a lot, and she travels with me sometimes. But when this sort of stay-at-home thing happened, when everybody was getting taken out of their normal routine, we basically had the same routine. It just became more focused. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that was really a blessing for us inside of us, a lot of the distractions got taken away. Things that you sort of normally take away your attention or your focus. It doesn't allow you to focus on some of the things that may be most important to you. Those things got taken away very quickly. And one of our big distractions is the NBA, which got reinstituted last night. Yeah. I mean, my wife, I'm blessed to have a wife that's a bigger sports fan than I am, right? I'm flipping through the channels, and she's like, turn the game back on. What are you doing?
Hey, man, I know you are close friends with Billy Thompson, right?
Yes.
From Billy the Showtime LA Lakers, right?
Yes, 1986 NCAA champion Louisville Cardinals. Yeah.
Yes.
And so when those distractions sort of went away, we sort of hunkered down and became, we actually got closer together as a family. So I have a son, Wynton Kelly, who's named after Wynton Kelly Stone Guess, who's named after Wynton Kelly, the pianist, but kind of four, Wynton Marsalis. He lives in Lisbon. He's working on his PhD in history. He's a classical composer. He has his master's from the Royal College of Music in London. So he's in Lisbon. My daughter Kennedy, working on her master's in speech pathology, was in Houston. She's home now. She came home. Mm-hmm. And my daughter Morgan, who will be a senior at Berea College, she came home at the beginning of the pandemic. And we have an older daughter. There's a reason. Only reason I tell people she's adopted because she's 40 years old. I'm not old enough to have a 40-year-old. she's in Louisville. So we actually communicated more as a family during this period of time than we ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And we just started coming together. I started writing more because I was writing. I was doing a lot of writing anyway, but I really sort of narrowed my focus and started writing more under the banner of our website, Educated Guesses. And
so the URL of that is educatedguesses.com. Is that right?
Educated-guesses.
Educated-guesses.com. Excellent.
And, you know, so what was really like a platform for my writing became a platform for the entire family. And so during that time, one of the projects I worked on was Cheryl and I celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary on June 2nd. So as a gift to her, I decided to write what I call fairy tale mixtape. And it's 30 short stories, actually 33 short stories, but it's a short story for every year of our marriage. And it follows a formula. And the formula is that each year there's a song that came out that year that I incorporate into the short story. And I use the title of the tune and a lyric from the tune in the telling of the story in a natural way.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so I did that over that period of time. So I wrote one of those a day and posted them. And it just kept me really busy. And I got really, really, really focused on writing. And so I used this at a time to take those distractions out of the way and really focus in on my writing. We got closer as a family, and we began to talk about some of the things that were going on in the world, particularly when a lot of it was George Floyd and sort of the social justice thing.
Definitely.
And each one of my children and then my wife Cheryl, we all had a different perspective on it. You know, the foundation underneath it was the same, but we had a very different perspective based upon our experiences, whatever. So it became really neat to see all of them write about that and talk about it from their perspective. And that's where sort of the second iteration of Educated Guesses were born, because particularly our children are much more educated than we are. We only have bachelor's degrees, and they're on their way. Each of them are working their way towards their PhD. So
that's beautiful, man. And the fact that you all became closer is one of everyone talks about all the downsides of the pandemic and whatnot, but the fact that your family was able to build a stronger bond over some really meaningful topics and issues is really, really inspiring. I'm
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that this is one of those times where you really have an opportunity to become introspective and work on something for yourself. The distractions are gone. This is one of the few times in anybody's adult life where basically everybody can decide, I'm just going to hunker down and work on me, and no one else would care. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So if you can say, well, I'm going to decide to read this book, or I'm going to decide to exercise more, or I'm going to decide something that's really focused on you and self-improvement, because the distractions are gone, people aren't going to be bugging you and saying, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Because they're sort of just, dealing with their own thing in their own head. So I often say, I tell people all the time, by the time everybody's sort of written 2020 off, because, it started off as a really bad year.
Yeah.
We're still in the middle of it. That if you get to 12/31/2020 and you don't have something that you can look back on that actually you can be proud of for your own self-development, then it's really your own fault.
Man, that's a truer statement couldn't have been said, and that brings me to another topic in terms of transition, right? And because it seems like this period of time has allowed you to make some decisions in terms of how your life is evolving. So yes. When the pandemic first started, can you talk to us a little bit about what the operations of Guessworks were like, and then how that evolved, and then where you are today?
Well, Cheryl and I, we went on back-to-back jazz cruises, like not the smooth jazz, the Blue Note, and the regular straight ahead jazz cruise. So we were on a boat for 2 weeks in January, early February. And before then, we were on the West Coast for a week in San Francisco and Los Angeles with the gig with Christian McBride. Christian McBride is our client.
Yes.
And I remember when we got on the boat, it's when the first few cases of COVID had been reported around the world. And they were asking us a bunch of questions about, whether we had a fever or whatever. So it wasn't like it is now, but it was just one of those kind of things. And we all thought that, like SARS and the other things that didn't really make it over here, we weren't really worried. But by the time we got off the boat and got home, it was a brave new world, a whole new normal. But, at that time we were, I was traveling. I probably traveled on the past. I've been in management in one way or another for 14 years.
Right.
And so, I've traveled anywhere from 200, probably a maximum of 250 days in a year to like 100, maybe an average of 100 some odd days a year. So I was on the road all the time.
And that was primarily with Christian McBride,
with Christian,
Sean, and then Sean Jones sometimes.
Sean Jones, and I did a big tour with Aaron once, with this Jelly and George project.
Right.
And traveling around the world. I remember during the pandemic and thinking. I remember one day on my refrigerator, there are a bunch of refrigerator magnets. And one of the things that I've done in my travels is really the only thing that I will buy as a souvenir when I'm on the road. Particularly, I don't do it in the States. I do it internationally as a refrigerator magnet from that city.
Nice.
And so my refrigerator is completely filled with magnets. And I remember one day, sort of early on in the pandemic, looking at the refrigerator and said, you know what? I don't want or need another magnet. I've been very fortunate to have traveled all over the world and seen and experienced a lot of things. And really about 18 months before this, I really started writing and thinking, because I'm in the middle of a couple of novels as well. And I started to think about, at some point I'm going to sort of hang this up and begin, push myself into my own writing. That's really what I want to do. And I started another website with my editor from ESPN's The Undefeated. His name is John Miller. I got a chance to know him. I got a chance to know him through writing for The Undefeated. I met the editor-in-chief, Kevin Merida. I actually met him through Christian McBride at the Newport Jazz Festival. He's a good friend of Kevin Blackistone, who's Blackistone's on Pardon the Interruption.
Yes.
A lot. And he and Kevin Merida are good friends. So they were in Newport for about 4 years ago. So I got a chance to meet them, and he gave me his card, and I pitched a couple articles, and I ended up writing for them. But John and I, because John's a Christian, I'm a Christian, so we started talking about writing, and particularly from the Christian standpoint. So we started a blog called cultureofchrist.org, and inside of that there's a series called Hymn a Week.
Yes.
Where we have hymn offerings from a lot of musicians, jazz musicians that I know that have put one of those up a week. But looking at all of that and all of the writing and sort of this reflective time as we got into it, I really began to think about, what, it's particularly on the Culture of Christ time, it might be time to make that transition. And when the straw that broke the camel's back for me was when the family came together and they wanted to write and they were contributing. And I saw this as an opportunity to build a legacy for my family. So It's something that they could do if we build this up to be large enough of a platform, that this could be something where they don't really have to go get a traditional job if they don't want to, right? If they have their PhDs, they can sort of do whatever they want as opposed to having to go down the road of going into academia.
Sure.
So that's when I decided, and Cheryl and I sat down and we decided, it's like, what, let's put our energies 100% into these online platforms. And so last week I formally told my clients that we're making a transition. So we're folding up the Guessworks management tent, and I'm sort of officially out of the management business. Although I'm in the middle of, Cheryl and I both, Cheryl works in the business with me as well. Right. We're out of the management game, but we have a transition period of a couple of months before we're 100% out.
Well, Andre, I just want to, congratulate you and Cheryl and your entire family on this transition, because, first of all, in normal times, to make this kind of leap of faith, no pun intended, I mean, it is admirable, daunting, scary, exciting, all at the same time. And then to do this in the middle of a pandemic is even more powerful. And I think it should serve as an inspiration for everyone, because, like I was alluding to before, looking at people have been really viewing this situation from a really half glass empty perspective.
Right.
But the fact that you've embraced the situation and have turned it into an opportunity that is bringing your family closer together, and also what it sounds like is making your daily life even that much more fulfilling.
Yeah. Well, I learned well, one thing, I don't have a problem jumping off a bridge. Right?
Yeah.
I've done that in my career many times.
Yeah, I know.
And but I learned a very important lesson one of the times I jumped off a bridge, which is at Jazz at Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
When I left and started my own consulting firm in 2006, there was probably not a worse time to start your own business, because that was right at the beginning of the burst of the housing bubble.
Correct.
And my house was one of those bubbles that burst.
That was in Jersey, right?
Yeah, in Montclair, New Jersey. So,
yeah.
I mean, that from 2000 really didn't start hitting us until probably late 2007, early 2008. House was underwater. We were bringing in not enough money to take care of everything that we did. We didn't file for bankruptcy, but we were very close to it.
Yeah,
and we were living hand to mouth. But it was one of those kinds of situations where, there were a lot of people suffering, but most people didn't know who was suffering, but a lot of people weren't. And it was a very humbling experience in terms of going from, a certain position where you're making a certain amount of money, have a certain stature in life, to not bringing in much money at all. But at the same time, right around 2008, I was still traveling all over the world, maybe having $100 in my bank account.
Yeah.
Making sure that, sure had enough at home to make sure the kids were. But, by the grace of God, we never missed out on anything that we absolutely needed. And
Right.
So it took us a while to climb out of that. It took us 8 years to climb out of that hole that was dug in 2008. So right around 2016, we got everything, we were on even keel. We don't have much debt to speak of it at all. It helped us to understand how to manage our money better. So when this thing came around, we were like, oh yeah, we know what this is. Right?
Yeah.
And so we were much better prepared for it. And we know what happens on the other side. So having gone through that, we don't have the fear that we might have had back then, because we've been through this before.
Man, that's impressive and beautiful. I mean, at the same time, it's like you've used all your experiences, whether they're good or bad, to leverage into positivity, which is why I always have viewed you as someone that's always just been so positive. And I think your positivity is infectious, to be honest. And that's something that I also like to touch upon, in terms of right now, like you were saying before, everything happening with George Floyd and all the justice issues that are occurring right now. We had a conversation probably maybe 2 years ago about a situation that was happening at the University of Kentucky, I believe, where I was at school, and Kennedy was participating in some protests, and then now it came kind of full circle with some of the recent happenings that have occurred at the University of Kentucky. So, and I know you've written a lot about this as well, but from your perspective, and I know you have a very unique perspective, and your family has unique perspectives. How would you describe the current environment and the current times we're living in right now?
Well, if you think about the George Floyd video, when I talk about the distractions being gone, it was one of those things where, because sports weren't on television, you've basically watched everything that Netflix had. No one's watching live television, because the only thing on live television that was worth seeing at the time was the news.
Yeah.
And when this came on, it just consumed everybody's consciousness. So that 8 minutes and 46 seconds, because everybody can quote that number because they saw it.
Yes, sir.
And I hate to put it this way, but if you had to have a poster child, if you will, of police brutality, it was that one. Because if you think about the other ones, I've looked back on my writings over this period of time, and I've written a piece almost every time it was published about an unarmed black man being killed by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those other ones, if you saw the glass as half empty, you could sort of explain away why that person may have lost their life.
Right. Right.
Oh, they looked like they were reaching for a gun. Oh, he attacked a police officer. Oh, he was coming towards him. Those kinds of things. But
some sort of scapegoat. Yeah.
Yes, this was a situation where no one in their right mind could say that there was anything that this man did that made it so that he lost his life. He did not contribute to the loss of his own life in any way. And so I think that made people think about this in a different way. It became obvious to some people that this is something different. This is a different situation. Now, you know, there's research that shows in advertising that you don't really get the message until you've heard it 7 or 8 times, right? So the first time you hear da 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 da, you know,
I'm loving it.
But after the 8th time, it's sunk in.
Yeah.
So the George Floyd thing, not only in terms of what it represented in terms of, wow, this guy didn't do anything to contribute to his own demise, but it might have been the 7th or 8th time that someone is starting to see this pattern, right?
Yeah.
And so now, it's put the country on notice that we are suffering not only from a pandemic as it relates to the coronavirus, but a pandemic as it relates to racism in this country. And so now we're just sort of grappling with how we deal with that public health crisis. My friend calls it a public health crisis. How do we deal with it? What are we going to do? And so my hope inside of all of this is that we find constructive ways to have that conversation, because it's a thing that cannot be solved without really painful and honest conversations, right? In his book, Democracy in Black, Dr. Eddie Glaude from Princeton talks about, he calls something he calls the value gap. So what he calls racism to a certain extent is that the value gap, that white lives matter more than black lives in this country. So he calls it a value gap between black lives and white lives. But he also has a thing in there he calls racial habits. And he talks about there are things that we all do, black, white, yellow, red, brown, whatever, what we all do to perpetuate the value gap. So there are things that we all do consciously and subconsciously, unconsciously, to perpetuate racism in this country. And so, but you can't heal from any of that. It's like a mental illness that we all suffer from, right? Because we're all buying into these negative tropes, these negative stereotypes, and our habits and our actions perpetuate it. So until we actually step back, it's kind of like an AA program, a 12-step program, and acknowledge that we all have a problem.
Right.
And then begin those steps of actually, we're not going to be able to deal with it. But I'm glad that it's at the forefront of the discussion right now. I just hope that this discussion continues and that we get to we don't put a Band-Aid on it, that we actually get to the deeper wounds.
So your kids and your wife, do they have a similar perspective, or do they have some different perspectives on that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, Cheryl and I are both from Louisville, Kentucky, and we moved back to Louisville when I left the August Wilson Center in 2012. So we've been back here for 8 years. It doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it's been 8 years. Our kids were all born here, but when we left, Winton was 7, Kennedy was 4, and Morgan was 1. And so they grew up on the East Coast, and they grew up in Jersey City initially, and then to Montclair, New Jersey. Yeah. And Montclair, New Jersey is probably the most liberal city in the town in the country. It's like, you look under liberal and, everybody loves everybody. You see Montclair, New Jersey. It's like 50-50, 50% black, 50% white. Cool. And, there's a mix in between. And so Kennedy, for instance, when she came back and enrolled in the University of Kentucky, it completely blew her mind. She's like, what the hell is going on here, right? like her being hit with racism, right, was so foreign to her. Yeah. Right. That she didn't accept it. Whereas there were many people her age in her cohort who were raised around it and have been in it most of their lives. They were like, it's not that they were accepting it, it was just sort of natural normal to them, that that's just kind of the way it is, right? Yeah. And so she became a little hell raiser.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah.
So she was like, I'm not accepting this. And that's the way we wanted them to be, because one of the main reasons I actually, other than it being my dream job, that I actually came to New York to Jazz Lincoln Center, is that I wanted my kids to be raised in an environment where it would be possible for us to raise them so that they would not hate themselves.
Yes.
Being Black.
Yes.
Right. That
yes.
they would, there's only so much that we could control. Like, one of the things that we were very adamant about raising them is that they saw Black images on the walls, the positive mm-hmm. Black images that they got. We in essence brainwashed them with overly positive images of Blackness, because we knew that they would get the opposite on the other end.
No question.
And I think we were successful in that, because when they were faced with it, they didn't accept it as natural normal. They didn't accept it that you're looking at me this way, or you're treating me this way.
Right.
So that's the thing I think that Cheryl and I are most proud of, is the way that they came out of their childhood. They're all adults now, yeah. with that sense of self intact.
That's beautiful. No, that's and much needed as well. In looking at how social justice issues have now absolutely melded with the sports world. Mm-hmm. We can't not have a conversation without talking about some sports too.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah. You wrote a recent article. It was like an open letter to LeBron James. Do you mind sharing your perspective on that?
Well, given the fact that we live in the age of cult of personality, and have for a while, we're just now starting to realize it. I mean, you go back. I mean, Ronald Reagan was an actor.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we have a reality star that's the president now. And so name recognition in this country and being a celebrity means something. And it definitely means something now, because you can be a celebrity for having not done anything. You're just a celebrity, right?
That's for sure.
Right. And so one of the great things about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it is a sort of headless organization. It's not like SNCC and some of the other things from the 60s, where you had like a John Lewis or Martin Luther King, or even a Malcolm X kind of a leader that was seen as the spokesperson for the organization. The Black Lives Matter movement is like water. It goes to where it needs to go in order to address the issues. They say that all politics are local. So if you're going to be able to deal with things at the grassroots levels, you don't need to necessarily leap to hear from above in order to move and do what you got to do. And so, but one of the downsides of that is that when you try to coalesce everybody around a specific thing to get things done, it does require leadership.
Right.
And so I'm not a LeBron James basketball fan. I'm a Celtics fan, which makes
I am a Laker fan.
Yeah, which makes it impossible for me to be a LeBron James fan.
Yeah, if you're a Celtics fan, you cannot be a LeBron fan. You're right.
But the one thing I've always admired about him is that the way he conducts himself off the basketball floor, and how he's done things like he took his friends that he knew when he was in high school, the three of them, and he put them in strategic positions. As a 19-year-old, to think that I'm going to take Maverick and have him intern at Nike, and I'm going to have what's the guy's name that's over Clutch?
Rich Paul?
Yeah, Rich Paul. Have Rich Paul intern at his agency, and then the other gentleman is his personal assistant. To have them in those positions, and then at some point in time say, okay, now it's time, guys. I'm going to bring you out of your learning curve in those positions. We're going to start our own thing. He did that, and he's been really successful. And they learned a really hard lesson by the decision, because that was that was not poured off well. But the beautiful thing was, if you're going to make that kind of mistake, make it early.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they learned from that and they moved on. And then what he did with the school, the I Promise School in Akron, was just amazing to me. Now, here's a guy who, he doesn't know anything about education. He's a basketball player, right? But he had such a standing in that city that he knew what it was like to be a kid, to go into a school and know what was needed in order for the kid to come out and be successful. So he galvanized all the resources, brought some money and some leadership to the table, and put together a school that is doing well, that people are trying to emulate. And so I thought, what if a guy who has all these Twitter followers that people, whether you love him or hate him, you know who he is. And even people that don't like him, like me, in terms of being a basketball player, can't help but respect him because the guy has led a clean life. There's no dirt on him, right?
No.
And so I said, what if LeBron James stood up and said, I want to actually go back to Akron and help them reimagine policing? Because with all this hashtag defund the police, and in my city, I'm in Louisville, so they're protesting now about the Breonna Taylor situation, and the police situation here is just, who knows what's going to happen there. But I said, that doesn't seem to be any fire happening in Akron. What if LeBron said, listen, I want to take President Obama's study that they did on policing when he was in office, and I want to take that and I want to call the who's who of that together, put them in a room, and then bring the resources to bear to help Akron reimagine their police department, and then let that be a model for the rest of the country. I think if he did something like that, it would speak volumes, because the other thing that could happen is if he did that, and when it is successful, just think about all the other celebrities or athletes in other cities that could follow and do the same thing. So it's a way of them using their outreach, their celebrity, their fame, their resources to actually get things done.
Yeah.
So when you marry that with the sort of be water of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think you have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think, hey, you never know. He may end up doing that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he very well could. So, man, I want to thank you so much again for taking the time. And
oh man, it's absolutely my pleasure. You call me, I'm wherever you need me.
But before we close out, man, I want everybody to learn your philosophy and your outlook on how the arts and music can help bring people together during these, what people, like we were saying before, interpreting it as half glass empty times during these really challenging times. And now with your new ventures, educatedguesses.com, cultureofchrist.org, you're already incorporating music into those platforms. So what is your perspective and outlook on how music as a vehicle, or the arts as a vehicle, can help to uplift during these unique times?
Well, music is the universal language. It speaks across all cultures. It speaks across all humanity. It speaks across all creatures. I mean, our cats love music. They change when we turn the music on. And so if you think back on your life, and this is what I did with Fairy Tale Mixtape.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I decided to use a song from each one of the years is because I needed to place myself in that time. And when you play that music from that time, it places you, it puts you in that moment. And if you think about some of your favorite songs, they evoke memories and a feeling in you that you can't really describe. And that's the power of music. And so it can do the exact opposite too, right? It can create a level of frustration or anger and destruction.
True.
Right? It's used that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But something that's that powerful has the ability to heal. And everybody loves music. It's not one of those things, whether it be opera or hip hop or jazz or whatever, everybody loves music. And so find yourself in this moment of time, because there are going to be songs that you're going to remember from this period, whether it be something that was recorded and put out during this period, or whether it's you discovered Stevie Wonder songs in the key of life if you're 13 years old or something, and you have a lot of time to yourself, and you decide to listen to that album. it's going to always remind you of this time. So, so that's the thing of music. With the arts, the art, at its most irreducible essence, art is our way of dealing with the human condition. I look around and I see this is the world around me. I have something inside of me that needs to get out, whether I'm writing, a story, a fiction story, whether I'm writing poetry, whether I'm filmmaking, whether I'm dancing or whatever. It's something that's inside of you that needs to come out to help you deal with the fact that you are struggling with or dealing with or trying to embrace this world we find ourselves in as human beings and how we connect with other people. And much of art comes out of struggle. And the other thing I say that for me personally, creativity for me is, I find I'm more creative out of constraint than I am out of freedom. And if I look at a blank page and I'm trying to write, if I just sit down, sit down and I say, I want to write something, I'll sit there forever trying to figure out what I want to write. But if I go in with like, I want to write something about this, if I put the box around me, and that's like, to keep going back to that format that I said about Fairy Tale Mixtape, some of the most creative writing I did during that time was to figure out how to get that lyric into natural prose and dialogue, right? I had to fit it, right? I had to fit something in there. And so that was and still have it tell an entire story. So yeah, man, there's nothing like art. And I've been very fortunate over the course of my career to work in almost all aspects of art, whether it be performing art with music or music, dance, visual arts, the literary arts, what have you. When I was at the August Wilson Center, we dealt with all of it. I just saw the power of art to transform people and to transform humanity and make us better. Life is a struggle anyway. The moment we're born, we start dying. And so the real question for us is to embrace, to me, the real question is for us is not whether or not it's a struggle, but is to embrace the struggle and make it a beautiful struggle. And art is the way to make it a beautiful struggle.
Andre, thank you so much. There's not a better way to close out this interview. And I just want to express my appreciation, all love to you, Cheryl, and the entire family.
Oh, thank you, man. This is, seeing you and seeing what you're doing. Ladies and gentlemen, this guy right here, is the reason I got a couple of raises at Jazz and Lincoln Center, because he did all the work.
Oh, man.
He did all the work.
Oh, man. No, man. No, man. Thank you for your continued mentorship and leadership, man. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah. I love to Claire and the family, man. You guys are always in my heart for sure.
All right, man. Thank you so much. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.